Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. Today's presentation is by Danielle Carlock about the Maricopa Seed Library. And the purpose is inspiring and equipping the community to create habitat at home. And so Danielle Carlock, who is currently our chapter treasurer, she's been gardening in the desert for about 10 years and has a native plant garden in Scottsdale with over 150 species. She recently founded the Maricopa Native Seed Library as a way to distribute free seed to the community and to promote the use of native plants in the landscape, with a special emphasis on supporting pollinators. She's taught biology at the high school and college level, and she's currently a library faculty member at Scottsdale Community College. So thank you very much, Danielle, for joining us tonight and letting us know more about the fabulous Maricopa Native Seed Library. Take it away.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you to everyone that's come tonight. My email address is there, and the webpage for the Seed Library is on this slide as well. I'm going to go ahead and advance it. And so just to get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I decided to start the Seed Library. And, of course, I have the interest and background in native plants and doing a lot of gardening here. But some of the things that really inspired me to get moving on a native seed project was that, there's so many threats to our wildlands and the native plants and the wildlife that's there. We see our large fires, drought, all these sorts of things. And so that inspired me to be thinking more about getting native plants into, our more developed areas. And then as I, look around at those developed areas, I go bicycling a lot in my neighborhood, especially. I see a lot of these home landscapes are really inert. Like they may only have, a handful of species, and some of them might be native and some of them might be non-native, but they're not necessarily the most wildlife providing or attracting or supporting plants that you could choose. So I think of those land, or they're all gravel, like total gravel, or all grass, and those don't really support much in the way of wildlife. So that was another thing that inspired me, was I want to change that. I want to work towards changing that. And then compounding that problem is a lot of native plants are not commercially available here. I just drove down to Tucson again for my annual visit to get plants down there because I cannot get a lot of them here. So I wanted to work on that too. And then, Doug Tallamy's written a lot of books along these lines about habitat at home and the importance of it and the urgency of it. And this idea, his homegrown national park idea, he's basically saying, our wildlands are so fragmented, they're so small that they will no longer be able to really do what we need them to do to support wildlife. So we need to do it where we live, in all of our urban and suburban areas, and that rural wildland interface. And so he's talking about folks developing, interconnected habitat at home. And that's sort of, all these things are why I founded the Seed Library, to try to help people remove as many barriers as I can to get folks to do this. So we'll be talking about a lot of those barriers I've been trying to remove as I go through. And on the slide is just some pictures of some really amazing native plants that are not available commercially here in Phoenix, at least that I have found. Any of these three, I had to get them elsewhere. I couldn't get them in Phoenix metro area. But they're here, they're native to here, and I've been collecting them, but they're not, you can't purchase them at the nurseries here. So habitat at home. So I talked a little bit about this already, but there's so many threats to our wildlands. And on top of that, we have the threat multiplier of climate change that's compounding all of those problems on top of everything else. So I feel a real urgency about this matter. And so I've been trying to do as much as I can, as quickly as I can, to try to work toward it. And I've really been inspired again by a lot of what Doug Tallamy, writes about. And, he just has some of these really good sort of phrases that get right to the heart of it, and it's so, even though he's, a scientist with a PhD, he uses a lot of plain language, and it just really gets to where we're going. And he says, what you have in your yard what you choose to put there, it influences what can live around you. Like, so example with this, um, the apuntia that I have a picture of there flowering, if I didn't have that plant or other plants that attracted native bees, they wouldn't be able to live where I am. They wouldn't have habitat. They wouldn't have what they need. They wouldn't have pollen and nectar, things like that. So, when I think about habitat at home, I'm thinking of it as kind of a radical, different way of thinking about gardening. It's much more expansive. For a long time, humans have gardened to please ourselves aesthetically. What looks good to us, whether it's native or non-native, whether it's doing anything for wildlife or not, what looks good for us. And so really to expand it out to say, well, what can I do intentionally? What choices can I make in my landscape, not only with the plants I put in, but the practices I engage in my yard to make it more wildlife friendly. And it can be small. That's the thing, is it doesn't have to be large. We talked about, the number of plants I have in my yard, but that's not necessary to have that many to support wildlife. It can be much, much smaller than that. Even potted plants in a small, a patio or something like that. So, and also, we know it's good for wildlife, but it's also good for us. It's good for us. It's good for our family and community. There's a lot of health benefits to gardening, and enjoying nature close up in your own home, in your own home landscape. There's benefits, stress reduction, a lot of different health benefits that have been shown, to as far as habitat for home, and that's not factoring in all the other benefits, the ecological benefits, the ecosystem services that are preserved by, having these plants with us and the pollinators and so on and so forth. So that's really what this is all about. And so now just a little bit about the seed library itself. I just ran into some folks that weren't familiar with seed libraries and weren't sure what they were. Because when you think about libraries, you think of having to return what you borrow, right? But a seed library, no, we're giving it away, and that's the goal. And we're not expecting anything in return. Seed banks are different. They store seed to make sure there is a supply of seed in case of some sort of disaster and things like that. So a little bit different than that. Seed libraries have been typically run by librarians like myself, but not always. And seed libraries, now getting a little bit more specific to ours, the seed libraries are open to everyone. They are at the Maricopa community colleges, but they're open to everyone with some pandemic restrictions still in place. I can talk about that a little bit, and the details are on the website, and that'll be constantly updated. But we are asking folks, and it's a real honor system. You don't have to have a library card. You don't have to have any ID. You just come in, you take your 3 packets, and you go out the door, and we don't ask any questions. And we just hope that people will honor that so everyone can have seeds. And so we're at 4 of the colleges right now, and they're listed there, and more information is on the website. So I will, actually, let me think. Is there any questions that have come up that are really pertinent now, or I'll keep going?
No questions yet.
Okay. And we'll have time at the end too. So I just thought I'd just check in. So I want to talk about what went into the preparation and planning for the seed library. So this was a long process. It took me about a year, and there was also some steps to go through because I was applying for this as a sabbatical to step away from my regular duties. So the process was at least a year of getting prepared. And one of the things I was doing was a lot of research. I knew a lot of the natives, but I didn't know, I'm still learning. There's so many native species here. I don't know if I'll learn them all in my lifetime. So, but I engaged in some, learning about native plants and looking around, not only at what I had grown, but what else was out there. I do sign net a lot, I naturalist a lot, and just I hike a lot. So I was out there constantly trying to figure out, what am I looking at? And so that was a big piece of it. And then I said, well, I can't offer everything. What are going to be my criteria? And I landed on these sort of 4 criteria. And of course, because of the habitat at home, species in the seed library should have at least 1 wildlife value, if not more. The more, the better. But that was what I was going after. And we'll talk more about that. That they generally weren't commercially available because I didn't want to put a lot of effort into ones that you could buy at the nursery. Let's say I wanted to focus on those ones that weren't as easy to get. That doesn't mean I don't have some that are commercially available, but these were the criteria I took into account. I wanted to make sure I was looking at, there's a range of how xeric and heat tolerant even plants are that are native to our area. I was trying to focus on, make sure I included some of those that are the most xeric and maybe avoided some of the more tender or, plants that needed higher levels of water and things like that, thinking about climate change. And that doesn't mean I don't have a few in there that have higher needs, but I make sure to specify those. And then if I could, easy to grow from seed. Not all the seeds, not all the plants are easy to grow from seed, and I'm still learning about how to germinate some of these, but that was another consideration I made. And so I went through and gathered, I think the target list has over 70 species, but in reality, I think only maybe 40 something have been brought into the seed library so far. And I developed plant profiles. We'll tour the website in a few minutes. And package labels. You could see the pictures of the package labels. One of the barriers, I wanted this all to be free. So that's why the seed library model, to remove that barrier. Then I wanted to make sure that I provided as much information as I could about the plants to make it as easy as possible. So that's why the labels have what they have. But then if you see at the bottom of the envelope labels, the tiny URLs, those connect to a plant profile that blows out and has more information. I'll look at one in a minute. So as much information as I can find. And some of them, especially the germination, there's not a lot of information. I'm slowly moving through and testing the different species in the seed library. And then of course, the website was developed and the social media was developed. And I have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. So this is an example of what a plant profile looks like on the web page. And so it'll have the name of the plant, English, and or the common name in English, and then the Latin name, the scientific name, and then any other common names I had, including if there were ones in Spanish, how easy it is to grow from seed, pictures of the plant, and then in italics, that's sort of my teaser, try to get people interested in, why should they grow this plant, and so that was kind of that. And then in the chart, it kind of breaks down some of the nitty gritty about the plant. And then I tried to incorporate recommended use in the landscape for each one, and then any references. Oh, so here's the last slide, and then we'll tour, I think, the library, the webpage, and come back. So as far as seed collecting, this is unique, as far as I know, I don't know really a lot of other seed libraries where they do their own collecting out and about. I mean, I think I've seen presentations of some seed libraries that do have their own seed sources where they grow and collect seed, especially for food plants. But in this case, I'm actually going out onto the Tonto with a permit, and also City of Tempe in a few instances, and doing collecting there. So because I'm trying to make sure I'm getting genetic diversity in the seed library. Now, that's not always possible for all the species. So we also have campus gardens and a home garden that I've been collecting from as well. So, and I've taken some donations, or people very generous over the last couple of months that have sent me. I started getting things mailed to me from folks all over the valley when I put out a call for some things I was getting really low on. And the seed processing was something I was doing largely myself last year, and I don't have any, mechanized any equipment or anything like that, other than some screens, and mostly doing that by hand. Some of them are messier than others, like thistle, blows around because it's a wind dispersed, and it's pretty messy. So a lot of that you want to clean outside, but that's sort of the lowdown on. Oh, so there's one more slide before we look at the tour. So the only other thing I just wanted to mention here is that the seed library, we have like some other things we're trying to do besides be a seed library, and that is education. There were workshops. I did quite a few of them last year that are recorded now, and on the website I'll show you. And the plant palettes, we'll look at least one of those. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Demonstration gardens with field guides. I added plants to the Red Mountain campus and the SEC campus. Not all that's shown there, those were there way before I got involved, but I added additional plants into these gardens that are seed library plants as another seed source, and as a way that people can come, look at the plants, and then go go to the seed library and get things that they just saw, you know, up close and personal. So now I'm going to attempt to go over to the website, and hopefully this will behave. So my tabs on the About section, it will give you what's new, what's the vision and purpose, and where to get the seeds, and then information on where the seeds came from, and a land acknowledgement. And I kind of, this is not the best, it's kind of a WYSIWYG, you know, I'm not a web developer. I don't know how to write code, so I'm using something WYSIWYG. It's not the best. I have, I need to do some reorganizing, but the About Native Plants. Oh,
Danielle, did you switch over to your website?
Yeah, oh, you guys can't see it?
It didn't switch.
Oh dear, I think I know what it is. Okay. So sorry, thanks for letting me know. I think I know what happened there, because I told it just to share my slides and not my whole. I think I have to bounce out maybe and bounce back in. Not sure here, I apologize. These are the kind of things that are always frightening when you're presenting. Okay, here we go. Oh dear, okay, it's wanting me to log in, which I don't know why. I need to do that. Okay. So I apologize.
You can see it just fine.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so the About, like I said, it just has some general information. Learn about native plants, that has references and links out about native plants. Workshop materials is one place where the workshops live with the recordings and handouts. They're also on YouTube. I think when you click, you'll end up on YouTube. Then I want to point out I'm trying to get these organized in the best way I can, but I've got some palettes here. What these are, let me open the, hopefully it'll still show this, I think, when I present. What the palettes are doing is an attempt to provide, this is like, okay, beginner, like starter palettes. I have one for nectar plants and one for host plants. And I also have advanced ones. The nectar ones don't assume any growing from seed, because these are plants that you can normally get at nurseries here locally. And so I broke it down by type of plant, like trees and shrubs, what the bloom periods are, because with nectar, it's really important to have plants a continuous bloom. So you want to have, and a goal is to aim toward 3 species per season in bloom. So this can kind of give you a sense, you know, what do I already have? And, you know, does it, you know, qualify? Does it get me across the whole 12 months with things in bloom? So that's kind of a palette. You know, if you're thinking about doing some gardening this fall, this is the ideal time. It's going to be October, and you can get, you know, plan out some plants from this. Even if you just get 1 or 2 nectar plants in your garden and you have a continuous bloom, you're in a good shape. And then the larval host one is for butterflies and moths, because they are very specific. They can't reproduce. They can't lay their eggs unless they have the plant that they use, that their caterpillars use, their larvae use in that location. So for instance, if you plant superstition mallow, you'll see the host for all those are different types of moths and butterflies that lay their eggs on superstition mallow. That one's actually a powerhouse because it's a nectar plant and a larval host plant. So I should probably get another category where I say, here's ones that meet both. But again, if you can have a couple of host plants in your yard, you'll start to be able to provide for these, you know, these insects more than just coming to yard for nectar. They'll be able to reproduce, which is really important, because nectar alone isn't going to get them where they need to be. So let me go back. I think that the biggest, you know, the most critical part of the seed library's website is the plant select, what I call select plants, which is really where you go to learn about the plants in the seed library. So how I have this arranged is by type of plant. Annuals, food plants, grasses, perennials. We'll just kind of go in, and I'm going to click on Tansy aster. And so this takes you to the plant profiles, you know, that I was talking about earlier. Links to these, where you can see all that information about the plant. and pictures of the plant. So that's your plant profiles. And again, the tiny URLs on the packets link to these. The other thing I wanted to show you was, let me go back. It's not just the profiles, but also some lists. Like if you want to see which species in the seed library are hummingbird attractors, go here and you'll get a list of hummingbird attracting plants. And then it links you out to those profiles of those plants. And then I also wanted to make sure that, you don't have to grow it from seed. There's some of these other ones that I don't have in the seed library are also really good hummingbird plants, and they're generally available at nurseries. So I don't want growing from seed to be a bar either. If folks want to get involved and don't want to, get too into growing from seed, there's a lot of options still at the nurseries. So then I think that was, and then just the final thing, the resources are a lot of various links, just additional links out. But the demonstration gardens, you have the field guides to the plants, so you can kind of see, it's another way of presenting a lot of the information in the plant profiles, but it's a list of each of the plants and pictures of the plants and what their wildlife value is, so people can walk around and look at the plants in the gardens. So let me go back. I'm going to go back and get to the PowerPoint. Was there any questions that have come up so far?
No questions yet, just a couple comments. First, Ian wanted to let you know that he still has some of the, let me find where it is, the Cucurbita digitata seeds for you for the library.
Oh,
I'm sure I butchered the Latin name of that. And and then Pam Shields let us know that she's the proud mama of many huge Rustica Sphinx moth caterpillars on 2 desert willows.
very nice. That's the thing that's really great too about having those host plants, is you can see the butterflies go through, the whole life cycle. Seeing the larvae is really exciting too, and then seeing the chrysalis. And if you ever get a chance to see them emerge, I saw a monarch emerge in my yard one Christmas. It was one of the most magical Christmases I ever had to actually get to witness that. So, and for kids, it's great for kids to be able to see all that going on in their own yards and be able to follow those things along. And so it's a great learning experience, and it's really joyful. I'm so glad that I got into native plant gardening. It's one of the most joyful things I've ever experienced in my life. It's having the habitat at home. The joy of that is just really incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about, in that first year, and I was on sabbatical, so I was working on this full time. We gave out over 3,000 seed packets, thanks to my colleagues at the seed libraries that were doing a lot of that work with, putting the packets out and keeping the inventories and all these sorts of things. We gave out a lot of seed packets. At Red Mountain, they were out doing it curbside, which is amazing. Somehow, I don't know how, I stumbled into media attention. Somebody from the New Times saw one of the seed libraries, and then it led to all this other stuff, which was great because it really got, I think, more people aware of the seed library and using the seed library. And a lot of nonprofits reached out, Audubon Society, the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. I'm trying to think who else. There's just been so many groups that have kind of reached out saying, hey, how can we, partner? And I already had, some partners here at the Plant Society and the Center for Native Urban Wildlife at Scottsdale Community College. So kind of, making all those connections and seeing how we can work together. And then, of course, the collaboration across the colleges. Like I said, I had 3 of my sister colleges that were participating. And even to the level now that 2 faculty are training interns to work in the seed library. That one of them is a biology faculty and one is geography faculty. So that's been really exciting. And I think just overall, I wasn't expecting it. I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to start this thing and no one's going to use this thing and no one's going to care. Oh no, and I didn't expect ever that we'd give out this many packets, or that, that'd be any media attention. So I was really excited to see that there's an interest, and maybe the pandemic helped with that, and I feel a lot of urgency around the topic of getting native plants in our yards and supporting wildlife. So there were definitely challenges, and most of these I'm still living with these challenges and trying to figure out how to surmount them. And so one of them is one of my flaws as a person and a professional is I scale up too quickly because I take on too much. And so probably, somebody from outside of this would have said, what, you're opening, 3 locations in the first year? Like, like start with one and then scale up. But that's not how, it worked for me, because I had interest from people and at different colleges, and I was dealing with the pandemic and trying to get seeds out to people. So I felt like more locations was better than none. So I did scale up more quickly than probably would be advisable. And then that created supply chain logistics where we're still all trying to figure out, okay, how do we get the seed, from the collecting to the processing to the seed libraries to the packaging, all these steps in supply chain, because librarians are not experts in supply chains and all that. So trying to figure that out and keeping the inventories and all these sorts of things has been a little bit mind-boggling. And a lot of it I was doing at home on my, I didn't have a lab or a lot of space to work on my piece of it. Also, there's challenges with germinating these species and a lack of information about what their requirements are. And so I did as much as a librarian, I dig pretty deep and try to find, exhaustive, what are the requirements of some of these species? And I didn't come up with information for a lot of them. And but I've been slowly working on trying to get that down, and so that's been a challenge. And then the availability of seed, I ran into, a lot of trouble with having the drought, that big drought, no monsoon, no winter rains, I think, and no monsoons the year of the sabbatical when I was starting this up. So luckily I'd collected quite a bit before that, but I was struggling this last May and June because we had not had rain for so long. So that was a challenge. And the seed ball project, some of you may have participated in, that was a challenge because the seed balls really needed water to germinate, so we weren't getting much. Then we had wildfires. I lost some, there's some places I was collecting seed on the Tonto that were damaged, pretty heavily damaged by a wildfire. I did go back out to one area, actually an area I hadn't collected before, but I was told about that's been burned. And of course the cacti are gone and some of the trees, but a lot of the smaller plants are coming back. There was quite a bit of, believe it or not, wild native ground cherries and devil's claws and things like that. Even in the burned area, walking through that burned area and having all that, and I was able to collect seed there. So, but I also had some timing issues and population issues. Timing is in, like if you miss a window, you're, sorry, it's not till next year. Like I wanted to bring ironwood into the seed library, but I wasn't here in town during that window when they went to seed. So that was it. And I got to wait again until next year. So there's things like that. And some of the wildflowers, the ephemerals, their life cycle is so quick that they're up, they're flowering, they're seeding, they're gone in a few weeks. And if you missed that, you missed it, and you got to wait a year, so there's that. And then just populations, like not finding large enough populations for certain species that I just can't collect because of the ethical guidelines around seed collecting, that you have to have a viable population. So those have been some of the challenges. And then another challenge is because there's no, we don't keep track of who uses the seed library. There's no way to really reach back out to people to get their feedback. And so I try to, put up different things, at the seed library itself, encouraging people to post, send me their stories, success stories or not, with the seed. I haven't gotten that many of those back. So that's been kind of another challenge. I'm putting it out there into the universe. I don't always necessarily know what's happening with it. Like, boy, would I love to know, if people are getting germination or if they're not, and with which, and all those factors, and how are they sowing indoors, outdoors, all these things. So that's something that's kind of a burning question, but I'm still plowing forward. So, as far as advice, I mean, to take on a big project, probably I should have been studying project management more in that year prior, but I had so much on my plate just to get to that point. That would have been good. Or if there would have been a project manager, someone who had that training that was, poor Lisa, I think she ended up being that by default, always warning me, oh, you're about taking on too much, and kind of trying to help me scale things back a little bit. But those kind of things are important, trying to keep it manageable, trying to, it's hard to say no, especially when people are excited about things. and trying to stay laser focused, is really difficult. I don't know if anybody's here that's interested in starting a seed library or augmenting one with natives. I did a workshop for a seed summit about that very topic that has some additional content specific to that aspect. So that is available, in that drop down on the seed library webpage under work. Oh, no, that one. Yes, that one it is available there. It is available there, and also at this link. So that's just some advice. And now, not heeding any of the advice I just gave you, I'm about to launch an even more ambitious project in year 2. But I am forcing myself to go in baby steps. It's ambitious in large part, but I'm starting with a small piece, and I'm hoping to work it for a long time. So this is where we're going next, is taking the idea of habitat at home further and saying, okay, we are in a climate emergency. We're in an extinction emergency. We need to get habitat into these developed areas as soon as possible. And so we have already some good pollinator habitat, like the picture that SCC and some other places have good habitat already. Well, let's connect those, because pollinators need, like all wildlife, they need interconnected, corridors. When it's fragmented, they can't travel, especially native bees don't have large ranges. They cannot travel far. So interconnected habitat. Also, it allows for better genetic diversity, sharing of the gene pools between. When you have fragmented habitats, their diversity can be lessened. So all these sort of things are beneficial. And so the idea is that doing outreach to people, businesses, schools, whatever, along whatever this pathway is designated as. So we have these habitats that already exist. We kind of map them out and then kind of see where we're going to go, and then try to outreach to people and give them support to join the pathway. And so that amount of support is going to vary depending on how many resources I can marshal to this. It may be a lot of support or less support, and I can scale it, depending on what happens with that. But the first step is going to be to get pollinator habitat guidelines in place. There's already many that exist from other projects elsewhere, and these sorts of things are being done in other places. There's the Northeast has a huge project. 200 towns, I think, are developing corridors in this way. But we need our guidelines that are for the Sonoran Desert. So I'm going to be getting a panel of experts together to help inform that. Then I'm working on establishing sources of plants and seeds, because I'd like to be able to provide that to people who sign up for this, at least as much support as I can, given how much resources and support I can marshal. Education, so more education, more workshops and materials. Ideally, my dream is to connect our students to the project with internships from the colleges, going out there and getting involved with the public to do this. That's the dream. And the proof of concept is I'm going to start at SCC and try to map to some locations that are relatively close to us and show how this could all work. And then attempt to get various funding sources to go bigger. And then again, scaling everything depending on how much support there actually is. I mean, some of these pathways, they don't provide a lot of support. They have a web page, they have a map on their web page. You can sign up and say, yes, I'm, adhering to these guidelines, and yes, I'm doing this. But I want to provide more support than that, to remove barriers and to get people more involved. So that's what looking at taking on next. So be watching for this. I'm trying to take baby steps and go slow so that I can try to follow some of the lessons I've learned so far. And some of the other priorities, I think I touched on this a little bit, but again, we don't know a lot about the germination requirements of some of these species. So get that out there, and that's going to be another piece of this too. Everything I've been talking about is getting that out there. And then keep developing the gardens as seed sources, because I want to be able to give seed to folks that join up for the pathway, as well as, for the seed library, have more plants available. These 3 plants pictured are ones that I really want to get into the seed library. I have now several Aristolochias on several campuses. It's a host for the pipevine swallowtail butterfly. The only thing it uses is pipevine, the plant. And this is our native pipevine, but I have not been successful in collecting seeds yet. Same in the Dudleya. There's a I think there's a typo there. That one, I have collected seed, but not enough to put it through the seed library yet. So this is sort of, keep expanding the plants in the seed library and get them into home landscapes and try to change people's hearts and minds about gardening. So I think, oh, I have one more. I almost forgot about this. This is maybe the most important slide. This is my call to action for you. And I want to encourage you to, now is the time to get going on your fall garden, because October is the best month to plant, because the soil is still warm. So it encourages good root growth, root development, which is important, and gives the plant all those months until the heat turns back on again, in the late spring there. So start planning. There's a lot of plant sales, like Lisa mentioned, coming up. You can use my palettes or profiles, get stuff from nurseries, get stuff from the seed library. Try to have both host and nectar plants in your space. If you could have at least something blooming, that's a nectar source all times a year, even in the winter here, because it's so mild. And try to have a couple of host plants. I did put just a couple of choices up there of nectar and host plants. And those are ones that are commercially available. Generally, believe it or not, velvet mesquite hosts a whole ton of different butterflies. Pretty cool. I didn't know that at first. And of course, it's also a keystone species, providing lots of other different types of support to wildlife. So get your seeds, get them from us, plant them. If you don't have time to plant them, or if you've gotten some, give them away to others if you don't have time to plant them. Share the news about the seed library with others. Share the news about Habitat for Home and the benefits it can provide to people. And if you do use the seed library, please give us some feedback about what grew, what didn't. I'd love to have that kind of feedback, because it's just kind of a empty, kind of a black hole there as far as what I'm putting out. And again, there's so many besides the plants. It's not just the plants, but it's the practices that you engage in. So our pollinators, the insect pollinators, and those are our primary pollinators, our bees, butterflies, and moths. Insecticides kill them. So it's really important if you can start scaling that back or eliminate that using those. There's other things too. Native bees need bare dirt most of them, not all, but a lot of them are nesting ground nesting. So they need bare ground. So that's another one. Having lots of cover, for, lizard, shrubs, different things like that provide cover for things like reptiles and birds. So just a lot of things along those lines. Some of my workshops on pollinator gardening get into that as well. And the Xerxes Society has really good information about that as well. So I think with that, I've come full circle. So I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, thank you, Danielle, so much. And I invite everyone to unmute if they'd like. And let's give Danielle a round of applause for her fabulous presentation. There we go. Got some virtual clapping and some real clapping. Wonderful.
Danielle,
thank you.
I gotta say, your work, what you are doing, is truly